practically no money, no tradition, no great plan, except there was this overriding dream of mine that whatever we did, we were going to have a very strong component dealing with technology and law. And as a phase of that, dealing with patent law, intellectual property law it's called today, and something that I felt was being totally neglected. I knew was being neglected in society, certainly in law schools, and yet it was going to have an explosive future.
Before there was a barn, there had to be an idea. Bob Rines had deep experience as both an innovator and an intellectual property lawyer long before the concept of the Franklin Pierce School of Law surfaced. He wanted to share this knowledge, to teach the next generation of lawyers about it, but he wasn't an educator. However, Rines soon learned of a man who seemed like a perfect fit, Bob Viles. At that time, living in Washington, D.C., Viles was dissatisfied with legal education in this country, and while he didn't have the background that Rines did regarding the intersection of science and law, he could run a school that taught it. And so, in March of 1973, Bob Rines met with Viles in Boston, speaking to him for an hour about coming to New Hampshire to start something new, something different, something powerful. "Well, I don't know what my wife will say about this," Viles told Rines, "but I'm your man." And so, Rines and Viles headed toward Concord's bucolic side, up Mountain Road to the Bull Barn. They put out the call for students, and the Franklin Pierce Law Center opened for business.
I met Bob, I think it was on either the 23rd or the 25th of March, 1973 in Boston. I remember there was a friend of the fellow in Hong Kong who made my shirts there, which made it even more memorable occasion. And on Sunday, 2 days later, when I was back in Washington, I decided to quit my tenured position and come up here. It seemed to be risky enough to be worthwhile. I mean that sincerely. It was a challenge. And that challenge has endured until today, and I am the envy of many of my friends because I really like my work.
Faculty members began to arrive in Concord, many of whom would mold the direction of the school for many years to come. Dick Hesse, Tom Field, Dean Simpson, Hugh Gibbons, and Dane Buck all came, followed by Ruth Chevion, Bill Joyner, Phil Hazelton, Joe Dickinson, Peter Brown, and a staff on whose shoulders the school was built. Joan Parker, Aggie Pichette, and Jeannie McKay. Bob Shaw arrived shortly, creating the unique patent practice programs still taught to this day. Of singular importance to the whole enterprise were the roughly 90 risk takers recruited, screened, and admitted as students. Many proved exceptional. Among them were Jim Conway and Doug Wood. Today, Wood recalls those early years saying, "The first class was basically a class of a bunch of misfits. We came to an empty building, so we had no cafeteria, we had no books, we had nothing, but we were all characters." Jim Conway also notes, "We had no upperclassmen. We didn't know what to expect. The popular movie back in the day was The Paper Chase, which was all about how horrible law school is, but we didn't know any better, so we didn't know what it was supposed to be like, and there was nobody to tell us what the rules were. So we kind of made a lot of them up ourselves." So began Franklin Pierce Law. News broke on June 21st, 1975, that the school had begun negotiating to purchase the United Life and Accident Insurance Company building at 2 White Street in Concord, with the hope of moving in 1977. When the time came to go, the whole effort was handled by the students, like many other projects at the young law school. During the 2 weeks after Christmas, a cadre of student movers, nearly 24 all told, hauled books, desks, and assorted paraphernalia from the law school's original location on Mountain Road in East Concord to its new home near downtown at White and Washington Streets. So began the era at our current location. Although Franklin Pierce Law Center would come to host classes, events, and lectures in many parts of the country, even the world, still, it was at 2 White Street, Concord, New Hampshire, where we finally found our home. Clinics were added. In addition to actually training students to practice, the school was a beacon for residents of the area needing legal help. Bruce Friedman, Ellen Musinski, Chuck Temple, Mary Pilkington Casey joined as clinicians, while Marcus Hearn, Sarah Redfield, Jim Duggan, and Appy Saunders became part of the regular teaching faculty. Law librarians Judy Geyer and Cindy Lando came on board. Sometime around 1977, a student talent show, later named Jive, was born, and Big Bird flourished. Students and faculty alike managed to injure themselves during the annual Buck Bowl. Idea and Risk became our law journals, followed by the University of New Hampshire Law Review and the UNH Sports Law Review. In the mid-1980s, the school's focus on law and technology really took off. With the addition of Homer Blair and Bill Hennessy, the school expanded its intellectual property offerings and most notably became international, with an impressive array of new programs. The Chinese Intellectual Property Summer Institute, the E-Law Summer Institute, held at University College Cork in Ireland, also the Intellectual Property Summer Institute, along with master's and LLM degree programs. Carl Jorda, an international IP leader and licensing expert, replaced Homer Blair and rounded out the team with Professor Bill Murphy. Mitch Simon came on board to direct our health law program. How does the beginning end? Bob Rhines retired as president, and then the Franklin Pierce community experienced tragedy. In short order, the deaths of Dean Viles, Bruce Friedman, Dane Buck, Joan Parker, and Eric Neiser occurred. The school wept. We needed stability and found it with the leadership of Admiral John Hudson, who was selected as our dean in the year 2000. Hudson served for more than a decade. Now reflecting on his long tenure, Hudson says the law school's key to success has always been its strict, almost obsessive, adherence to the rule of law.
You know, in recent years, we've had some trouble with that. But that's what makes the United States of America different than most of the other countries, is the success we've had with adhering to the rule of law. And what is more important than a law school to teach people to do that, to be mindful of the law and support it in every moment of their life, basically.
Hudson was joined by new faculty: Keith Harrison, John Orcutt, Sophie Sparrow, Susan Ritchie, Mary Wong, Peter Wright, Stan Kowalski, Amy Vornberg, and Albert Buzz Schur. The school expanded with a significant addition named after Professor Buck. Jeannie McKay retired. John Garvey came on as the director of the Daniel Webster Scholars Program. And we signed an agreement with UNH. Then, in the fall of 2011, another major step forward: an opening ceremony for the Franklin Pierce Center for Intellectual Property. It marked a momentous occasion for the school, with 3 judges from the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals and the former registrar of the Copyright Office, all in attendance. Now, UNH Franklin Pierce School of Law was firmly on the map for its intellectual property reputation. When Dean Hudson retired, he was followed by retired Chief Justice John Broderick, whose tenure as dean marked the opening of the school's 2 new centers.
The IP Center opened actually during my first year here. So I was really proud that we kept our place and actually improved over time. I'm particularly proud of the Rudman Center. I had a lot to do with the board and getting that going. We raised over $4 million for it. And when I became dean, they asked me to help create a pillar here that was something beyond just intellectual property. Not that we were going to downgrade IP by any means, but we wanted to appeal to law students who would have been probably more like me, who were not focused on IP, but broader social policy issues.
As dean, John Broderick invited Mike McCann, director of our sports and entertainment program, to join the faculty. Professor McCann says UNH Franklin Pierce was the first law school in the country to venture into sports betting in the law and has been a leader in sports and entertainment law. Now, about a decade after he came on board, McCann says he's proud to see how well his program's graduates are doing.
We have students who are in those professions that are thriving. They're at law firms where some of their practice involves sports or entertainment, or often both. We have students that are involved with these industries, not necessarily as attorneys at firms, but doing other sorts of work. For instance, we have a number of students that have been hired by universities to work on NCAA issues, which have triggered all sorts of legal controversies in recent years. There's a lot of work in that space. I'm so proud of students that have worked so hard to get into those fields. Again, very competitive, but our students are diligent. They work super hard. We have students that are doing sports betting in the law. And it's really neat to work with students and then see them go on to succeed.
Around the same time as McCann's arrival, Lucy Hodder also came to the school, reviving and expanding our health law and bioinnovation program. Professor Hodder says it's an incredibly dynamic field of practice that's constantly evolving.
The last 10 years have seen a complete shift in our healthcare delivery model. We've seen the Affordable Care Act, we've seen changes in FDA regulation, we've seen the onset of biosimilars and biologic drugs, we've seen the COVID pandemic and all of the changes that have come from that. So major hospital consolidations and antitrust issues. Every single year I say, how can there be more happening in health law and policy? And there always is. And what's really been wonderful is the way we've been able to also rely on other core curriculum in the law school to fill out what these law students need to go and practice in the health law area.
Along with expansions in health law and sports law, our school's Warren B. Rudman Center for Justice, Leadership, and Public Service also saw growth over the past decade, especially in the center's Summer Fellows program. Here's Center Director John Graby.
The Summer Fellows program provides support so that students who land positions, volunteer positions over the summer with government agencies or nonprofits, that they can pay their bills. So over the last few years, the scope of the program has grown immensely through the efforts of many people in the building to find supplemental funding. And over the last 3 years, we have been able to provide support for each and every student who has secured an appropriate summer position. And again, the requirements are only that they work for a government agency or for a nonprofit. And many of our students work for government agencies and nonprofits that serve vulnerable populations. This year is going to be a record-breaking year. The last I heard, we have 85 students lined up to be Summer Fellows, and we look forward to supporting them.
Graby says the Rudman Center's spirit of public service applies to everyone at the law school, no matter what field of study they pursue.
We try to instill in all of our students the notion that a lawyer is somebody with an obligation to serve one's community. And this can come in the form of serving on boards, other forms of civic engagement, and of course the performance of pro bono legal work on behalf of people who need it.
And over the years, UNH Franklin Pierce School of Law has expanded and solidified its national leadership in intellectual property law. Mickey Minhas, director of the Franklin Pierce Center for Intellectual Property, says with IP in the headlines every day, our graduates' expertise in this field is more important than ever.
Over the last number of years, we're hearing a lot of technology buzzwords, whether it be the metaverse or blockchain or crypto or now artificial intelligence. Our technologies are rapidly evolving, and the law is naturally several steps behind of where technology is. As such, in knowing the fundamentals of intellectual property, the policies behind it, and where it should be, will really help guide the lawyers that we produce to understand where the law should be going. As we all know, when you're dealing with clients, they're going to look for an answer. Can I or can I not? Should I or should I not? The answer of it depends isn't really going to be good enough, right? They need some direction. And in order to guide them appropriately, we really have to make sure that our students have the underlying philosophies behind these different areas of law to guide students where there are no rules.
Minhas says he loves to hear from employers that graduates of our IP program stand out for their strong practical skills.
You know, we've heard time and time again from firms and other folks who have been hiring corporations and so on about how Franklin Pierce grads stand out with their practical knowledge. From classes like PP1 and PP2 or the various exercises and different classes they have, that practical skill set, I think, really helps students stand out in the early parts of the career.
But UNH Franklin Pierce School of Law has not just innovated in the types of programs it offers, it's broken new ground in the way that the law itself is taught. One example is the Daniel Webster Scholars Program, a rigorous, skills-based 2-year simulated training program whose graduates are automatically admitted to the New Hampshire Bar. Here's Program Director Courtney Brooks.
The program is a huge asset to the school because it brings a lot of attention to the school because we are really cutting edge in being the first in the country to have a competency-based program. Following COVID, a lot of states started to reassess whether the bar exam as it exists now makes sense and have looked at other ways to assess practice readiness. States are still struggling with how to do what we do. And I think that is because, and a lot of them tell me it's because we have so much involvement of the bar, the court, and the bar examiners in the success of our program.
After more than 15 years since the Daniel Webster Scholars Program began, Brooks says it's especially gratifying to see the strength of its alumni base.
The truly special thing, and I think time and again, if you talk to a Daniel Webster Scholar alumni, they will say it's the camaraderie and the relationships that you build in the Daniel Webster Scholar Program. One of the graduates always says, once a Webster, always a Webster.
Of course, in addition to all the programs, the deans, the professors, the staff, UNH Franklin Pierce School of Law has always been defined by our students. They've created something special here, a unique international culture, a spirit of camaraderie, of hard work, of innovation, and yes, fun. Over the years, our students became alumni, many achieving at the highest levels. Judges, members of Congress and state legislatures, mayors, and so many others who've contributed greatly to their fields and their communities. So, who are we today? Under the leadership of Dean Megan Carpenter, we're the innovative law school, with an emphasis on training students to practice law, with an international leadership reputation in intellectual property, and a passion through our Rudman Center for training the next generation of leaders in public practice and policy. We have full and diverse classes and loads of new faculty. And so, after 50 wonderful years, where are we going in the decades ahead? Here's the Dean of UNH Franklin Pierce School of Law, Megan Carpenter.
The future of our law school draws significantly on our past. Our law school was founded with 2 principles in mind: to be the best intellectual property-focused law school in the country, and to train students to practice law, to be lawyers, not just to think like lawyers. And like the best innovations, those seem like no-brainers now, but at the time, this was highly unusual. The pioneering principles on which we were founded have served as a beacon, a North Star throughout the decades. They were the first principles we return to again and again when we engage in strategic planning, when we ask, what's next? Over the last 6 years, we've once again redefined professional graduate education. The creation of the hybrid JD in IP, technology, and information law has been transformative, not just for us, but for legal education as a whole. It's the first hybrid specialized law degree approved by the ABA. And the reason I get a lot of phone calls from deans asking, how did you all do that? As a school that focuses on launching the careers of IP leaders across the country and around the world, many of our applicants aren't coming from straight out of college. They're working, some are mid-career. And as we seek to diversify the legal profession, especially in the field of IP, we realized we need to meet students where they are. Law school's expensive, and if you're limiting the pool to people who can afford tuition and quit their job, maybe sell their home, move their family across the country, well, that's an increasingly narrow and privileged group of people. Through this program, we use technology to enable students to stay in their jobs and homes and become lawyers. We take them all over the country and hopefully soon around the world for intensive in-person courses that engage industry and law firm leaders. So they're learning not just from our stellar full-time faculty, but from people on the cutting edge of legal issues. This takes Franklin Pierce beyond Concord and gives us a presence across the United States. And the students are building their professional networks, all while they're in school. This program, like DWS, our residencies, the great work being done by our centers, and all the other innovations that have come before, is reimagining legal education in a way that is true to our principles and will benefit students, to train them to hit the ground running and to run faster and go farther than their peers. And this program has led to the highest enrollment in the history of the school and the most diverse student body we have ever had. What are our goals going forward? To reinvent professional graduate education as we know it. With the advent of AI and disruption in the legal services industry, we need to reconceptualize legal education to teach students new skills, how to be strategic advisors, counselors, how to combine business and legal judgment. We do that through our clinics, our residency program, DWS, our faculty who are committed to practical teaching, and these groundbreaking immersive capstone short courses across the country. The old model of higher education was to take a group of students and isolate them like a monastery, keep them separate from the real world, and then they can truly focus on their learning. But law is all about the real world. We should contextualize learning for our students to bust through that brick and mortar and help them make real connections. A second goal is to have a student body that reflects the diversity of our time. As the first woman dean at this law school, I'm incredibly passionate about this. In 6 years, we've increased diversity more than sixfold. We have the highest percentage of students of color of any college in the university system, and significantly comprised of underrepresented minorities. We're about 10% veterans or active duty military, about 15% LGBTQ. We have more mid-career learners and non-traditional learners than we've ever had. Our entering classes span either 5 or 6 decades, depending upon whether we have a 1L in their 70s. We're also focusing on rebuilding our strength and reach on a global scale, educating the next generation of IP leaders around the globe. We've historically had relationships in places like China, India, South Korea, Taiwan, and across Latin America. And we need to fortify and strengthen those relationships and to build in emerging IP markets like Nigeria and Indonesia. The work that Professor Kowalski has done in emerging economies is foundational here. A fourth goal, to engage our alumni every step of the way. We can't do what we do without our alumni, who are truly pioneers. We have the highest alumni giving in the history of the school, from 2.7% to 11.4%. We can't be the leader we need to be, we can't be the innovators we need to be without the support and engagement of our alumni every day. Finally, to maintain financial strength and to be true to who we are, we can't rest. It's the dilemma of an innovator that we're the first to do many things, but there are a lot of people behind us, and we need always to be asking the question, what's next? As Dean Viles said, the prospect of starting the law school was a rare opportunity to stop talking about what's wrong with legal education and start doing something about that. We started doing it in 1973, and we still are 50 years later. It is an honor and a privilege to lead this school, and I can't wait to work with our alumni, our faculty, our staff, and our students on what's next.